I was born in an orphanage, and I spent the first few months of my life as a foster child. I have real empathy for foster children. And do you know what group of children are being railroaded into this gender ideology and damaging their bodies? The children in care of the state. They're foster children. And I'm sticking up for them. I spent a whole career working with special needs kids.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freedom Feature. And I'm your host, Barry Bussey. With me today, I have Barry Neufeld and his lawyer, James Kitchen, who will be talking to us about the case involving the Chilliwack Teachers Association against Neufeld because of Mr. Neufeld's position on the Board of Trustees at the school board. There was a lot of controversy because of comments that he had made and some writings and so forth on very controversial subjects. And it's certainly been a major contention in the news over the last number of weeks since a decision was handed down in which the BC Human Rights Commission issued a compensatory order of over $750,000. And so I'm very happy to have with us today these gentlemen. And gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us as we're talking about this very important case. And I just start out with you, Mr. Neufeld. How does it feel to be facing such a large order that you've got to pay?
You know, I believe I'm on the side of truth, and I am a man of faith. I believe the Lord will defend me with a little bit of help from my lawyer, James Kitchen. And truth will come out. You know, around the world, countries are backing away from this gender ideology. It started in Finland, Sweden, then England, France, even Holland, who was a great proponent, and several American states are realizing that this gender ideology does not help people. It does not help children. But Canada, and especially BC, are hanging on to this gender ideology that there are more than two genders and people can be born in the wrong body and their gender might be different than the sex they were assigned at birth. Mm-hmm. And so I'm confident that in the end, we will triumph. But they're putting up a big fight, and we have to stand against them.
So tell me, James, this case, can you give us a little bit of a short background? And then also, we want to look into what your thinking is with respect to how the decision came out and its precedential value.
Sure. So Barry, when he was a school trustee, he said several things at several meetings and on Facebook and otherwise online that can be summarized as, look, boys can't become girls. Girls can't become boys. There's no such thing as being able to just switch your sex or your gender. Look, this is actually a bad idea to do this to kids. Transitioning children is child abuse. That's what he said. That's what a lot of us say. I've said it, and I'll say it again because it's true. It's just true. And if you're somebody like me or Barry that cares about kids, you feel compelled to say something like that because you see the harm that's done. And he ultimately talked a lot about this belief system, and that's what I've called it as a lawyer and making my arguments for the tribunal. I've called it a belief system, an ideology that you can actually switch your gender. And when I say can, I mean what these people believe, the people who believe in gender ideology or transgenderism, they believe that if it's a man, that when he says he's a woman, he actually metaphysically is. Right, he's not just pretending to be, that he actually is. So the language we use is identify as, right? So when the man, I guess he goes by the name Jessica Yaniv, Morgan Auger is another famous example in BC. When these people they're both men, but they identify as women, They believe that they actually metaphysically are women. Okay. And the problem with gender ideology is, unlike many other religious or ideological belief systems, what they require is not simply that you let them believe that. What they require is that you adopt the belief as well. Okay. So what this means in practice is that Morgan Auger would say, well, it's not good enough that you let me believe I'm a woman. You have to actually believe it too. You have to believe it too. You cannot express your belief that I am a man. Okay. And that's ultimately what this case was about. Okay. And I knew that. What's interesting is for the last 10 or 15 years that we've had this whole thing, right? We typically just talk about, well, they want to be tolerated. They want to be accepted. They want to be treated equal to transgender people. Right. And I mean, most people can get behind that. Most people just want every person, every human being to be treated with equal dignity and whatever, right? To be tolerated and accepted, be allowed to keep their job and rent an apartment and obtain a service. Even though, this man is identifying and presenting himself as a woman, he should be able to participate in society, right? Most of us can get behind that idea in the abstract. As Canadians, we're all about that, right? Mm. But the problem is, like, what do they really mean by that? And it's never been really clear what they really mean about that. And I think people haven't realized because they haven't thought about it the way somebody like me has. And so I went into this case because obviously I knew I was going to lose. It's a BC Human Rights Tribunal. They personally believe in this ideology, okay? The people at the tribunal, this is a personal belief system that they share, which of course is obviously a problem with bias, but we'll put that aside. And I know that. I know that the commission believes in it. The tribunal believes in it. Everybody who works with they believe in this ideology. So I knew we were going to lose, okay? But I thought, well, the value in this can be at least clarifying what the issues are about and presenting it to the public so the public's aware of what this is really all about. This isn't about merely acceptance. It's about compelled belief. It's about establishing blasphemy laws, right? Thou shalt believe that when a man says he's a woman, he actually is. You have to adopt that belief, okay? And so I presented these arguments to the tribunal and I said, look, the problem here is that you're going to try to find that it's hate speech to say for Barry to say he doesn't believe this, right? He doesn't believe that a boy can become a girl just because he says so. He believes that because it can't happen and because it will be harmful when it's attempted, this impossible thing is attempted, it'll be harmful to the child. He does believe it's child abuse to encourage this impossible thing that will cause harm, sterilization and all the rest of it. He does honestly believe these things. He doesn't believe them out of hate. That's obvious to anybody who's ever heard or listened to Barry or knows Barry. I said, but to the tribunal, you're going to try to establish its hate. And the only way you can do that is by establishing that if a person doesn't believe these things, they've engaged in discrimination or hate speech. And so I actually tried to lay that trap for them, right? To get them to acknowledge that so that we weren't talking about tolerance or acceptance or equality or dignity, because that's not what these things are when you're trying to compel somebody else to believe something, somebody's delusion, right? And sure enough, the interesting thing is they fell for the bait. And so one of the things that's talked the most about this case online and in the news and elsewhere is paragraph 55. Which, so in paragraph 54, if you bother to read, because this decision is available online, the chair of the tribunal, Devin Cousineau, she's the one who was in charge of the hearing, and she wrote the decision, I believe. She quotes me, and I take two paragraphs and I describe what gender ideology is, and I specifically say, like any ideology, the people who believe this don't just believe it as a pastime; they believe it's metaphysically true. Like people who believe Jesus is the Son of God believe he actually is. Like he was an actual real entity that really is the Son of Yahweh and came and, died on the cross and created the world and saved us from our sins and all the rest of it, right? Like Christians actually believe that. Not just on Sunday morning, they actually believe it like all the time. Same thing with transgender people, right? They believe this is actually true. They believe that as soon as they say they're the opposite sex or opposite gender, they actually are. This is the belief system. So they believe it's true. Okay, just like Christians believe Jesus truly is the Son of God.
Right.
But so I said, so the problem is that this is incompatible with society when the fact is what they believe is actually not true, and people are not being permitted to actually say what they think is true. So the tribunal quotes me and they say, look, we can think of no worse thing that you could possibly say about what transgenderism is. And they go on to say, look, unlike Christianity, I gave them the example of Christianity because I know they don't like Christianity, so I knew they'd fall for it. Unlike Christianity, okay, because with Christianity, you don't have to believe in Christianity in order to not discriminate against Christians. In other words, you can say, I don't think Jesus is who you guys say he is. I think you guys are out to lunch. That's not discriminatory. Okay. She agreed with me on that. She said, but transgenderism is different. Unlike Christianity, you actually do have to agree with the transgender person. You have to adopt their belief. If you don't, it's discrimination. Because if you don't agree with them, when the man says he's a woman, if you don't agree, you are denying their existence. Okay, that's the phraseology they use, because their position is, well, his existence is now, his existence in the world and the universe is now as a woman. And so if you say he's not a woman, then you're denying he exists, because he only exists now in the world as a woman. And if you deny someone's existence, I mean, obviously you're discriminating against them. Obviously you must hate them.
Well,
right?
and it would also kind of, I guess from their perspective, see it almost as genocidal, right? In the sense that you
Yes.
don't want them to exist.
Yes. The tribunal pretends that people like Barry and I actually don't want these human beings to exist, right? Kind of like you're a Nazi, you don't want the Jews to exist, right? I mean, they didn't say that, but that's the insinuation, right? The existential denial is the same idea, right? So, but the thrust of this is that you actually now have to adopt the belief of that man, the man who believes he's a woman, which is a delusion, let's be fair. You have to adopt that delusion for yourself. If you don't, the state will penalize you. In Barry's case, it was $750,000. The state will penalize you if you do not adopt this belief. That's compelled belief. That's a blasphemy law. Right? Blasphemy laws are, this is the state religion. If you express a belief contrary to it, you will be penalized by the apparatus of the state. That's what happened here, right? This is a new blasphemy law of, look, the ideology of transgenderism has been adopted by the state. Any believers of this ideology, you must adopt, if they require it, you must adopt their belief system. And if you don't, you'll be penalized, right? It's compelled belief, it's blasphemy law. And it's in addition, obviously, to the censorship and the violation of free speech. It's also a violation of belief, okay? You're not allowed to believe that a man is not a woman, okay? You have to believe a man is a woman if he says so. That's what this means. That's kind of a big deal, right? Like that's beyond the charter, beyond like, oh, is this justified by Section 1? It's like, no, way deeper than that. How is society supposed to function? If a man goes around and says he's a woman, and you say, no, actually, I don't believe that, then that person can ultimately be fined. Eventually, we're going to have things like contempt of court and going to jail, etc., etc. That's where we're at with Derek Fildebrandt, right? He's been sued for calling this man, Jessica Yaniv, a man. And he said, I'm not going to pay the fine. You know, he'll be found in contempt, and then he ends up in jail. And then so you have people in jail because they're not adopting the belief that a man is a woman. That's where this is heading. I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm not trying to be like over dramatic. That's literally what this means. Okay, that's the precedential implications of this case. That's not overstating it, right? I mean, people like Jordan Peterson, and to much lesser extent me, because I don't have the kind of reach he does, have been warning about this and saying this for 10 years. Right, and we weren't overstating the case. That's where this was heading. It couldn't have gone any other way, right? And so, you know, people are going to have to decide. Okay, are we going to have the state religion of transgenderism with people in jail for expressing their belief that men aren't women, or are we going to put an end to the madness? Basically, that's where this is going to have to go. And so now, for me as the lawyer in this case, the question is, will the courts, and because we've got our decision now, we're going to file for judicial review at the BC Supreme Court, which will probably end up at the BC Court of Appeal. That's the next stage. So will either of these courts, say, okay, this has gone too far. This is compelled belief, and we can't have that. It's incompatible with the functioning of our society, not to mention the charter. And we're just going to have to put an end to the madness, right? I mean, tribunals got good intentions. They're trying to protect trans people, whatever. I mean, say whatever you got to say. But are we going to follow the law that we can't have compelled belief in this country, in addition to the fact that we can't have censorship? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if the court's going to do that or not. But that's obviously my goal. That's my job, is to try to persuade the court to do that. And if it doesn't, to try to let society know this is where it's at. Okay, the court has now told you that you are going to have to believe that a man is a woman. You're going to have to believe that 2 + 2 is 5. That's the state of the legal system in the country. If it gets to that point, that's going to be my job, is to tell the country that, provided I'm still able to, provided I haven't been taken out yet.
Yeah.
That's where this is going. So it is pretty serious,
Yeah. No. As you said, if you're still around, or the implication here is that either you're in jail or something happens to you, or you know what I mean, like someone is so angry with you, or that would do you harm. Is that what you're insinuating when you said that?
No, I don't mean harm. I mean, at some point you have to wonder if a judge says, "Well, Mr. Kitchen, I can't let you continue to say these things." I mean, you're saying that, you're saying that when a man says he's a woman, he really isn't. I can't let you continue to say that, right? That's a direct violation of the BC Human Rights Code. You're going to be in contempt of court if you continue to say that. Or the Law Society says, "Look, Mr. Kitchen, I mean, you keep going on these interviews, and you keep saying that this is the new state religion, and that transgenderism is an ideology, and that it's it's not actually possible to change your gender. We can't let you do that. I mean, it's unprofessional conduct, right?" I don't live in fear of that. None of that has happened yet. I actually have no idea if it will. I mean, it'd be great if it didn't. Obviously, I want to keep doing what I do, but I'm not going to stop. I mean, I have to speak the truth. Not only is it my obligation to my Lord and Savior, because I mean that's ultimately what motivates me. It's my obligation. I mean, just as an advocate, as a lawyer, as an officer of the court, I have to speak what my conscience tells me is the truth. I mean, I'm ethically, morally obligated. And I mean, I can't live with myself either, right? It's my own conscience, right? I have to speak the truth, and I will, at the cost of whatever, come what may. Not to be dramatic about it. I have no reason to think it'll come to that, but I have every reason to think that that's possible. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess that is the problem. Like, I remember when Jordan Peterson first came on the scene and refused to accept, compelled speech on this issue, and everyone was he was treated as if he was some kind of a conspiracy theorist or something.
Yeah.
But as my good friend Bruce Party says, conspiracy theorists often turned out to be perceptive pundits, because you can see where, if anyone is reading history at all, we can see a lot of similarities between, things that went on, for example, in the French Revolution, where you couldn't accept, if you didn't accept the way the revolution was going, there's this concept of the revolution eats its own. And we're definitely in a time where, we've got feminists like J.K. Rowling, who's being just pulverized by the press and pulverized by any of her sympathizers, even with Amy Ham, who put up that sign in BC, I love, J.K. R, and that was enough for her to be kicked out of the nursing profession. So it's a very, very powerful and scary, and I would say challenging time for us as a society, because on the one hand, we want to be sympathetic to everyone. We want to live in a country with, let there be civil peace, let people live the way they want to live, or whatever. But when you are forcing me to say that, I have to agree with you, is like, so that the very engagement in political speech or discussion is in and of itself defined as hate, like we saw with Mark Miller there a few weeks ago on the the Bill C9 issue and so on. So it's these are the kinds of things that I think we got to be looking at. Now, I want to come back to you, Barry. How has this case been for you personally? Like, I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, obviously, you've got international attention now on this case, but how are you holding up, and what's keeping you going?
Well, my initial reaction to when I heard about this was scientific and professional. I thought this was not good for children, but my strength and my determination comes from my prayer life, and from the encouragement I get from Christian brothers and sisters. That's what keeps me going, and um, I don't ask people to give me money, but I just pray and ask the Lord, and the money's God moves on people's heart, and the money is coming in to keep the lights on at James's office.
Yeah. Well,
Just
yeah.
barely, I think, but the money's coming in slowly but surely.
Mhm. And then for you personally, like, I mean, for anybody who stands up for a position that a large group of people, I would say a very vocal group, right? It doesn't matter what time of era we're in, because I find it fascinating how throughout history we have had individuals that no matter what happens, they are true to their conscience and will stand up. And I mean, we've seen it as well. In the the whole. Well, I mean, there was a time back, obviously, in the '60s, for example, when uh, this ideology was becoming, or just in its infancy. Um, but uh, but then there were people who were so convinced of their position that they were going up against society at large, until finally, society started to move their way, until eventually now we're in this case where now their ideology is now to be forced on others, as the way they claimed that ideology in the past was forced on them. And it's like um people will take these stands, right? So I look at you and I say, okay, I mean, that takes a lot of nerve uh to stand and to be in many ways vilified by you read the decision itself, but also you read the press accounts, and all the rest of it. And how is it for yourself? Do you find yourself being alone, or do you have a lot of people coming up to you saying, Barry, I wish I had your nerve, but I agree with you, but I'll never say anything in public because I got a job to protect, or anything like that?
Well, I must admit that I had taken early retirement in 2008, went back to a seminary, and was preparing for a position as a chaplain. And I was not aware that this idea of gender ideology was building up steam in our universities, especially in gender studies departments. And so in 2017, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't believe how many people had bought into this. And I seemed to be the only one who could see that the emperor didn't have any clothes. And it was lonely at first, but in the past year, especially, a lot of people have come out publicly and supported me. People in public life, and they've taken some hits. After it was announced that the Human Rights Tribunal had sentenced me to $750,000, some trans activists, they started making complaints, and they laid complaints at the Human Rights Tribunal, and they were all asking for $750,000 from people like Dallas Brody, the an MLA in Victoria who has spoken for me publicly, for Kelly Lynn Findlay, contender for the leadership of the BC Conservative Party, for Billboard Chris, who's been gallivanting all over the world, preaching this same message that I have. And more people are sticking their necks out and being counted. At first, there was a lot of people who admitted they supported me privately, but they were too afraid to say it publicly because they didn't want to lose their jobs or their social status. But in the last few months, in the last year, a lot more people have been standing up and supporting me, and that's been a great encouragement. I'm glad to see that people are finally seeing that what we need in this country is courage, not going along with the herd.
Yeah, and so when we're involved with an issue that has become very controversial, James, we think of you know, I look in the past where you had people like William Wilberforce in the British Parliament. You had all kinds of different social activists down through the ages, where people have been really giving them all a rough time. I think of even various religious leaders. I think of John Wesley, for example, who was trying to reform the Anglican Church in Britain, and would be constantly beat upon. And I mean, thank God we haven't come to that kind of thing here in this country with these things. But people are passionate about their views, whether it's a religion, and as you're pointing out, this is an ideological position, and it's a matter of belief, and it takes people to stand up and engage in conversation. I guess my question is to you as a lawyer, and I know you're concerned about freedom of speech as well as I am. How do we, as a society, deal with controversial subjects when the mere discussion of the subject, people say that in and of itself is hate? Like, how do we get out of this?
Well, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I don't know if we can. I don't know if we will. Collectively, as a group of people, the Albertans have decided, well, the way we get out of this is to literally get out of it. So I mean, that's
as in leave Canada.
As in leave the tyranny of Canada. Economically, politically, in the sense of civil rights like free speech, all the rest of it, right? How do we, whether Alberta leaves or not, how do we, as the rest of Canada, get out of it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's going to sound pessimistic, but I mean, the majority of Canadians don't want to. That's the trouble. I mean, all the 68-year-old women that voted for Trudeau don't want to get out of it. They like the security over the freedom. They like the censorship over the offensiveness. They prefer it. They want it. I don't know if those people are persuadable at this point, right? I mean, that's what they believe, right? So, man, I don't know. I mean, I guess what you do is you try to save the younger generation and hope that they will turn it around. In some sense, that's what any social movement has done, good, bad, or ugly. They try to get the young people. I mean, so will the young people in Canada say, no, 2 + 2 is not 4. Boys aren't girls. I know it. I've lived it. I've seen it. All my friends have tried it. Some of them got their breasts cut off and it didn't work. Now they're detransitioning. So we don't care what all the old people are telling us that we got to believe. It's like anything in history, right? The young people just revolt against everything they think is stupid and holding them back. And maybe they decide, you know what, this whole idea of free speech, maybe that actually is a pretty good idea. Maybe it isn't just something I read about in a history book. Maybe it's like, okay, now I can't actually believe what I want. My friends can't believe what I want. Maybe we've had enough of it. I mean, I get that question a lot. I used to give all of these fancy answers, but maybe that's just what it comes down to, because I can tell you about how we need to clean house with the courts, and we need to get rid of Section 1 of the Charter, or maybe just get rid of the Charter altogether. I mean, it was never really that great of a document, to be frank. Maybe we need to, go full American and get a proper constitution. I could give all kinds of answers about that, but I don't know if any of those answers make sense to anybody. At some point, law is only as good as the people who write it, who decide to follow it or not follow it, who decide to enforce it or not enforce it. Right? It's ultimately going to come down to the people. Academically, I would have said America's free because of its constitution. Okay, sure, there's a point to that, but at the end of the day, the reason they're free is because of the people. It's because of the people who are dedicated to it, who are committed to it, who live and breathe it and know it, and are willing to die for it at times. Right? It comes down to the individual people themselves. Go live in the States for a year. Right? A place like Tennessee or Kentucky or Idaho, not California, and it's in the air, right? They understand what their freedom is, and they're willing to die for it. And it's not just about some stuffy institution. It's about the actual grit of life. And for a Canadian, it's not like that, at least not yet, or at least it hasn't been for the last 100 years. And I don't think anything can possibly change unless, for whatever reason, the younger Canadian generation decides, yeah, we're going to be a little more American about our perspective on our individual freedoms, and we're going to live it out. And if the court tells us that 2 + 2 is 5, we're not going to follow it. We're not going to be scared. We're not going to put up with that, right? I think that might ultimately be what it comes down to. And if those individuals, an aggregate of those individuals, aren't willing to do that, then we're going to be stuck with it. Argentina was stuck with socialism for 100 years. Before finally they said, we're getting rid of this. That's probably what, I know this sounds awful, but that's probably what Canada signed up for, especially if Alberta leaves, right? Because, most of the freedom people are going to go that way. If it stays, maybe Alberta will have this positive influence in the rest of the country, and we can somehow pull it around. But I think Canada's probably going to be signed up for a century of security over freedom, which just means a whole lot of censorship and tyranny before 3 generations from now the people figure it out. That's probably where we're going. I'm fighting against that. Just so to be clear, okay. I haven't thrown in the towel, but I need to be realistic about where this is going, and I think people need to too. If they're gonna stop this, they better get really serious about it, because somebody else isn't not going to do it for them. Someone's not going to come and rescue them from the tyranny. They're going to have to claw their own way out of it. So there you go. That's my not so hopeful, but a little bit hopeful answer to your question.
Yeah, and I think there's the element that people get tired of issues, right? So you have this moment of discussion and debate, and all kinds of acrimony perhaps might be expressed back and forth, and then it's kind of like, okay, let's just decide it and move on. Let's go on to another thing. We're sick and tired of hearing this issue, but we then have to figure out, okay, how do we, again, it comes back to how do we live together with our differences? Because one of the problems I have that I noted when I was reading the decision of the Human Rights Commission is just that there really isn't much room for debate from their perspective. And now that we get Bill C-9, where hate now is basically going to be broadened further, and we're going to be, taking away the protection, that little bit of protection that was there for religious views in the criminal code when it, discusses, it makes reference to hate and so on, and you got, Mark Miller's statement that, just the mere reading of the scripture itself is going to be a problem. you're kind of like, okay, so yeah, like one wonders if we're going to come to a place where, as a society, we're going to have a real struggle if we can't get along, right? If we're not willing um, uh, to live in a place where people have very different views. One of the things that I noted during the COVID experience was that the people who were really into the let's get everybody vaccinated kind of thing were extremely irate against those who were not vaccinated. And it was almost like, again, a blasphemous thing not to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the people who are watching this program to know a little bit about you, Barry. And I hear so much, right? I mean, like even in the tribunal's decision itself, this concept that it's very hateful what you said and all the rest of it. And a lot of people will, from the various perspectives, would say, "Oh, this is just a white man who's very prejudiced, an individual who doesn't care about humanity, as has no empathy at all for people who have struggled with gender dysphoria and so on." But tell us a little bit about you. Are you this horrible, horrible person? Or are you a person who is like, um, you know, what is it that what's your sense with people who disagree with you?
Actually, to be honest, I'm actually quite a nice guy. I was born in an orphanage, and I spent the first few months of my life as a foster child. I have real empathy for foster children. And do you know what group of children are being railroaded into this gender ideology and damaging their bodies? The children in care of the state. They're foster children. And I'm sticking up for them. I spent a whole career working with special needs kids. I had a stepdaughter who was profoundly deaf, and I worked hard to create a special school that would meet the needs of deaf children, and that led to my interest in public education. As a probation officer, I worked with children who were most of my clients were foster children, but they had um, all sorts of attention deficit disorders, and they were purging and gorging, and they were cutting themselves and drugging themselves. And I've got real compassion for special needs kids, and these are the ones that they're going after, and they're ruining their lives. And I have nothing but compassion for these people. My harshness and my judgmentalism is against the professionals in the medical field and in the educational field who are railroading these children, and it's not right. And I'm standing up against them. They think they probably mean well, and they think they're doing these kids a favor by encouraging them to transition, but it's a toxic compassion, because if these kids that go through puberty have a hard time, we all did when we went through puberty. It wasn't fun, especially for a lot of girls. They don't like the changes that are happening in their bodies. But if we leave them alone, they grow through it. They become healthy, well-adjusted young women and young men, and they can look to a life of a fulfilling life of getting married and having a family and carrying on. But if these gender ideologues get in there and start chopping off body parts and pumping them full of hormones and chemicals, they're going to ruin their bodies. They're not going to enjoy um, the simple pleasures of human intercourse. They can't experience an orgasm. They can't have children. They can't nurse babies. And these are the kids that I'm fighting to protect. And no, I'm not a hateful person, but I am very critical of an ideology that I think is the worst medical scandal to ever um, hit us in the past century. We've had a couple of other medical scandals in the 1930s. It was all the rage to use lobotomies to slice off the front part of people's brains and make them more controllable. President Kennedy's sister was a victim of that horrible um, medical treatment, and it wasn't until the 1960s when we realized that was terrible. And then in about 10, 20 years later, there was this thalidomide scandal. Thalidomide was a drug that was given to pregnant women to prevent morning sickness. And then they discovered that these women were giving birth to babies who were deformed. They had no fingers, no arms, no legs. And all the world realized that thalidomide was causing these deformities, and they began banning the use of thalidomide. But Canada, as usual, backward Canada, dragging its feet, the doctors in Canada kept prescribing thalidomide for 90 days after the rest of the world had banned it. And all around the world, they're backing away from this gender ideology. And Canada is lagging behind everybody else. And BC is probably the most uninformed and ignorant jurisdiction anywhere in the world. And I believe we will overturn this ideology. I'm not saying that we should get rid of human rights tribunals, but I am certainly calling on the government to, number one, get rid of Section 7 of the Human Rights Tribunal. Number two, get rid of people like Devin Cousineau, who's such a narrow-minded ideologue. And the other thing, in our human rights code, we can't have gender identity in there because I believe that's a mental illness, and you can't make a mental illness a right. It's just going haywire, and so I'm passionate, but I'm not hateful. Hope that explains.
Yeah. Well, and of course, just I'm sure for those who are watching would say, well, like even the statement that, gender or a gender ideology is itself a mental illness or that kind of thing would be something that, a lot of people would say, hey, what's going on here? This is unacceptable. But yet it's part of engaging in a discussion on a very controversial issue that people are very upset. They will say, well, I'm very distressed that you would even hold that view, right? And so I guess that is the situation that we are now in, is how do we, because someone is upset because you hold the view, that you can't express the view, that is then where the rubber meets the road. And James, I'll come back to you. How do you, as his lawyer, engage in helping the Canadian people understand that when it comes to freedom of speech, there's going to be differences of opinion. There's going to be strong positions, but yet Mr. Neufeld needs to have the opportunity to express why he has that view. Also, his life experience is something that he is able to share and say, hey, look, here I am. I've gone through what I've gone through in my life, and I've seen what I've seen. And I'm just telling you, there's something for us to be concerned about here. You may not like it, but we need to keep this conversation going. And giving out $750,000 of his money is what is that saying for freedom of speech in Canada?
Well, usually one of the big things about this whole thing is equality, right? The people that are supportive of the trans people, or supportive of the native people, or supportive of whatever. Pick your favorite group. They're all, but these people have to be equal, right? We want everybody to be equal. Well, what about equality of free speech, right? I mean, if people deserve to be equal, don't they equally deserve to be able to express their views? The trans person says that some feminists have terrible ideas and they're terrible people. The atheist says, I think people who believe in God in the sky have a mental illness, and that's a real world example. There are some atheists that would say that. The whatever, right? I could go on and give the examples, right? And you're always going to be able to find somebody who is whatever, emotionally dysregulated, psychologically immature, whatever it is, says that really upsets me. That hurts my feelings. I'm really bothered by that. That's not okay. It makes me feel unsafe. I don't want to have to experience this. And I'm sorry, but at some point, like, those people have to be compassionately told that they need to grow up a little bit, because we live in a society of adults, and adults need to be able to disagree, or else they're not going to be equal. And you're going to have some groups or some individuals that are going to have way more power than others. And again, we don't need to have a PhD in history to know that when some groups or some individuals have a lot of power compared to others, they are, because they are human, they have human nature, they're not perfect, they're not gods, they're going to use and abuse that power against those other human beings. That's just the nature of being human on earth. That's how it works. That is like the story of history. The story of history is tyranny. People using the power that they obtain against other people. They like it. It's addictive. It's kind of like a drug. I mean, trans people are not any more evil than the rest of us, okay? But like the rest of us, when they get the kind of power that they can use to shut us up and force us to believe what they believe and make us pay them money and all the rest of it, they're going to use and abuse that power. Of course they are. Because anybody would, okay? Because that's how we are, unfortunately, right? Like, you have to deny human nature in order to say, well, that would never happen, right? And it's a whole problem with the Aboriginal industry we have in the country, right? I mean, I sometimes have clients who are actually Indians, Aboriginals themselves, and they're being taken advantage of and abused by their chiefs, who have all this money and all this power because of the Aboriginal industry. And at some point, just to be like, hold on. If we actually believe in the ideas of equality, then maybe we actually need free speech in order for that to work, right? Because if you're a left-wing person who's been brainwashed into this whole thing, you've been told that free speech is bad, free speech is just a cover for hate speech, it's just a cover for people to hurt other people's feelings. Maybe try to question that for a second and say, well, hold on now. How can we be equal as people if we don't equally have access to free speech? I mean, today, right now, because I'm on the right side of the issues, I can say whatever I want. But what if tomorrow the winds change and then I can't say whatever? I mean, you get a lot of like people in their 50s and 60s who like used to be left wing when they were young. They're like, hold on now. I never really changed my views. I didn't really like change what I said. But what I say now is the same as what I said 25 years ago. And now it's hate speech, right? I haven't changed. What I'm saying hasn't changed, but the winds of society have changed. And now all of a sudden I'm a hater and I'm saying illegal things, right? Because that's how society, if you base your principles on just whatever is like, in vogue right now, well, that's great if you happen to be popular right now. What's it going to be 20 years from now? It might be that the views you hold are now the illegal ones. And now you're the one being treated unequally. You're the one that's being threatened with jail or fines or whatever, right? You can't base laws and policies on feelings. It's basically what this comes down to, right? Transgender people are saying, it hurts my feelings when you don't believe that I'm a man, or you don't believe that I'm a woman, either one. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you base your policy and your laws and your approaches to everything just on how you feel about things, it's going to be a mess. Like, let's just be honest about it. It's going to be a mess. That's the mess we have now, right? This is why principles, they might be boring and esoteric and ivory towerish, but they do actually matter in practice, because this is what happens when they're not followed, right? If you replace principles with emotions, right, people's feelings, it's whoever happens to be the most emotionally immature amongst us, which, to be frank, it often ends up being the transgender people. then they end up ruling the day, and then society becomes chaos. It becomes a mess, right? And we can't have the basic civil conversation. I know you've been talking about that, Barry. It's important to you because it is important to you because you recognize that that's like a fundamental aspect of society. If we don't have that, we're going to be a mess. We're going to be chaos. We're going to be anarchy. We're going to be, now it's a power struggle, right? Now we're just back to that, right? We're trying to get away from that like brutish society where it's just a power struggle all the time. That's where we are at. That's where we're going, right? If we just base everything on emotions, like what the transgender people want and the tribunals want, that's what it's going to turn into, a power struggle between those who happen to wield state power at the time and those who are dissenting, right? And that's not sustainable. It will ultimately result, in chaos. It ultimately result in probably some form of violence, right? I mean, it's what we're getting to some degree with some of the trans people. It's resulting in them committing violence against people with the school shootings and stuff. And I mean, we're just going to get more of that. And you can only stop it by stopping and thinking and saying, hold on a minute, I won't be ruled by my emotions. I'll try to think through this a little bit. Maybe this is not a good idea, right? I don't know how else to get people to stop this other than to just ask them, stop and think for a second, right? Try to grow up, emotionally regulate a little bit, think about what's going on. I mean, that's obviously geared especially towards the young people, but there's a lot of old people that have that problem too. That's the only way you can try to fix this and actually have conversations. I mean, we're having this conversation. It's really calm and civil because we're emotionally regulated, right? I'm telling you, people undervalue the importance of emotional regulation. I mean, let's have a little more of that. Let's have a little more individual responsibility. That would help our society a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What I've gone through for the last 8 years has been nothing short of elder abuse. I have a traditional view of family and of gender roles, and the new gender faculties in the universities have come up with concocted this crazy new idea. So because I was accused of being an old dinosaur and a Luddite, way back in 2018, I applied to be admitted to the World Congress on Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And because of my experience as a probation officer working closely with psychiatrists, I was admitted. And I remember going to this one workshop. It was led by a very handsome Portuguese physician. And he was so handsome, the girls were swooning over him. And he was telling them how he was handing out these puberty blockers, and the kids were so happy with it. And they were really enjoying their work, which is unusual because most adolescent psychiatrists, kids don't like them. But we asked him, what are the side effects? Well, he didn't know. That was 2018. A month ago, the Portuguese parliament outlawed gender transition and affirmative care for children. I imagine that his career is totally ended. So I outlived him. And my opinion still holds weight that if you're born a boy, stay a boy. If you have a rough time going through puberty, hang in there. You'll come out of it on the other side and be a healthy young man. The same goes for girls.
Well, folks, I just want to thank you both for sharing your views here, because this is something that obviously the conversation is going to continue, whether people like it or not. There's going to be this conversation, and the beauty of the English experience, the English law, has been that we have looked at it, in many ways, nothing is new, right? So I think, for example, of the street preachers of the 1600s, whether it was John Bunyan, who was put in jail because he was preaching what he was preaching, and then, he writes the Pilgrim's Progress while he's in jail. We get all kinds of very heated moments in our societies, and this is obviously one right now. And I think what we've got to realize is that we need to allow people to have discussion and to be allowed to speak their minds without demonizing one another. And I'm also mindful that, as you've pointed out, both of you have pointed out, we're looking at situations right now where we've got this power imbalance, where you have an institutionalized ideological position that is now, captivated universities, captivated many government um, uh, institutions, and it's one where uh, you know it takes individuals to have very strong views to be able to buck the system. And I think for those who are out there looking at this, and you're saying, well, look, I don't agree with Mr. Neufeld, I don't agree with Mr. Kitchen, but can we not at least agree that these are important discussions at this time when we see so many young people who are struggling? There's a whole debate and discussion about, the young people that are literally living on our streets across this country, which is extraordinarily bothersome to me as well. But here we've got, this very important case going on right now in British Columbia, where um, the the teachers unions and the profession, the teaching profession in Quebec, that are saying that a parent is not to be told what a child is going through with respect to their gender dysphoria in school, and they're now going to change their pronouns. Now, that's an important case that is going to um, cause, like, how the courts are going to be dealing with that. Are we going to allow parents to be parents and children children? Or are we going to allow institutions that have been in many ways co-opted with various different ideologies? And is it going to be the parents that have the say, and or is it going to be the government that's going to have to say? And it's interesting as well that just recently, and I think, James, you may know more about this than I, but I know recently the U.S. Supreme Court just recently ruled that the parents are to be told and are allowed to, take their kids out of the schools if necessary, when it comes to these ideological positions.
The best advocates for a kid are their biological parents, a loving mom and dad.
Yeah.
The state makes a horrible parent.
Well, we used to know that in Canada. Justice Laforêt told us that in the 1990s. Justice Laforêt is a former justice of the Supreme Court of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 1995, if I have my date right. He told us that in a very important charter parental rights case. The current Chief Justice, though, Justice Wagner, who prides himself as being the Chief Justice of a very progressive court, whatever that's supposed to mean, I think he would probably gladly disagree with Justice Laforêt and throw that, who's, by the way, happens to be a father of a lesbian, if that means anything. He's not some raging right-wing lunatic, okay? Justice Wagner would probably love to throw that precedent in the trash bin, and progress us towards this utopia where, parents don't have any rights and the state's in charge of everything, and we have state religions like transgenderism, and that's great. So yeah, I know. I think the Americans got it right, and it comes back to first principles, right? We have to recognize that the state is actually the greatest source of evil that has been perpetuated upon human beings for time immemorial, right? And we have to, like, as young people, as old people, I don't care. We have to, like, sit down and maybe just understand history enough, understand human nature enough, regardless of where you come at it from, whether you're atheist, Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever you are. Just recognize a basic human fact that we actually aren't so great. And when we get together and get ourselves a lot of power, we tend to use it, abuse it against other human beings. And the great American experiment is recognizing that okay, we have to do whatever we can in our power to stop that, right? And Canadians seem to have no interest in that. They think the state can bring them a utopia. Anytime you go for a utopia and you try to use the state to do it, you will get the opposite. You will get a dystopia, right?
Yeah.
Read some Margaret Atwood. I mean, she's a famous Canadian leftist who comes up with all these dystopian novels, and her and I would disagree on the politics and what led to that. But she describes, in Handmaid's Tale, for example, she describes this dystopia, right? You don't get the dystopia without the government power, without the government control. And every time you let the government decide what you can and cannot say and what you can and cannot believe, you're giving them more control. You're going to get more dystopia. You're going to get more tyranny. Like we have to stop and recognize that the state is going to be the greatest source of evil in individual humans' lives. Let's stop giving them all the power to decide what we should say and what we should believe. Right? Just because they might be on your side right now, and they're saying, if you're a lefty, if you're a kid, if you're a transgender person, if you're a gay person, if you're a Native person, if you're a Black person, and you feel like the state's on my side, it won't stay that way. It won't always be like that. What's going to happen 20 years from now, 40 years from now, right? And the state has moved on to something else, and now you're on the wrong side of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like let's take away the state power and give the power back to each individual person, some of which, yes, you might disagree with, and let them decide their own lives. I mean, that's it's what the gays have been saying for 50 years. Let us live our own lives. And it's like, okay, we actually, you know what? We decided that's a good idea. We're going to let you live your own life. Let's do that for everybody. Let's do that for the Christian. Let's do it for the person who doesn't believe in transgenderism, as well as for the transgender person. We're not saying they can't go about and live their life. We're just saying that we can't adopt their belief system. Isn't that fair? Right? Isn't that fair? Really? I mean, if the Christians went around and said, you got to believe in us, if the Muslims went around and said, you got to believe in this or else, we'd be like, that's not cool. Right? Just forget about all the policy and all we'd be like, hold on, that's not okay. That's not right. I think we can agree on that, can't we? Mm-hmm. Right? And so maybe that's what we got to do at a more human level, is say, it's not right for you to force your belief on me. I don't care who you are or what you believe. It's not right for the man who believes he's a woman to tell me I have to adopt that belief too. It's just fundamentally not right. I think we can agree on that. So let's agree on that, and let's do something about it.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago, where he references to the fact that it's so extremely important for us not to live by lies. And now today, many people would say that truth is relative and all the rest. Well, your truth is, and my truth, it could be very different, all that kind of stuff. But it is in that engagement of discussion of the meaning of truth and what is truth that we've been able to advance as far as we have until now. And it's what's happened with science, as Barry mentioned. It's just this the whole idea of being able to try to determine the truth of things. Well, guys, I see that our time is gone, but I just want to thank you both so very much for sharing and being so candid. And I'll just let you each have a few seconds to give us your final thoughts. I'll start with you, Barry. What is the most fundamental idea and important concept that you would like to leave with those who are watching this program today?
Well, picking up from your remark, live not by lies. Rod Dreher wrote a book with that title based on the quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And Rod had said something on X about my case, and I replied to him. I said, Rod, it's all your fault. I'm in all this trouble because I read your book, Live Not by Lies, and look where it got me. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do what I believe was true. And I do not believe that a boy can change into a girl or a girl can change into a boy. And I don't believe there's anybody that's partway or halfway between. You're one or the other. That's the way God created it. And God doesn't make mistakes. People are not born in the wrong body. End of story.
Okay. And James?
The thing I always try to tell people is maybe you can't do much to stop the censorship around you, but you can do something about stopping yourself from doing it to yourself. It has to start with not self-censoring. It has to start with developing the emotional, psychological fortitude and courage to say, okay, I'm not going to self-censor, right? Which is, I mean, that's, live not by lies, speak not by lies, right? You have to start speaking what you know to be the truth in your life and take the risks to do it. The more you don't take some risks now, the more risks you'll actually probably face down the road. So take the gag off yourself and live not by lies.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I want to also thank you, our listeners. And for those of you who've been tuning in for the last hour or so, as we've had this very fascinating discussion with two gentlemen who have been engaged in this very controversial decision that was made by the BC the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And just to recognize that behind these cases are very passionate individuals who are committed to the important principles, as pointed out, getting back to the basics. And Mr. Neufeld has suffered a lot as a result of his public stand. And many people will say, well, I disagree with him. And that's fair enough. You can disagree. But he also has a right to be able to speak and to address. The problem is that we're finding, as was pointed out in an article that I wrote about this case in particular, is that when we come to the place that we say that even speech itself is hate, and that we can no longer have any more discussion, then we're at a crossroads. And as James Kitchen points out, his lawyer, that we need to allow a society to be free to speak and to be able to engage in these kinds of conversations, even though they're difficult, even though people may be against it. But nevertheless, this is what democracy is about. This is what the heritage of our law has given us, to be able to seek truth and to live not by lies. So thank you for being with us. And I encourage you to go to our website at firstfreedoms.ca. And there up on the right-hand corner, you can just click for signing up and joining our newsletter. We try to get a newsletter out at least once every week or two. And so it's not like you're going to be pummeled with all kinds of information that, you get sick and tired of seeing our emails or our information that we want to pass on to you. But I encourage you to do that. And until next time, make sure that you live not by fear, but live by faith, not by fear, and know the truth. And the truth will ultimately set you free.
Amen.
Until next time, I'm Barry. The fight for freedom consists not only in the legal battles in court, but also in the battle of ideas at the universities and in the media. It takes time, effort, and money to keep on top of the debates for freedom. Your donation allows us to keep fighting for all Canadians. Firstfreedoms.ca.